All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is Jay again, and it is May here in Phoenix, Arizona, and the heat has been turned on us. It is quite hot now. We are definitely into the consistent 100-degree weather. And like I advise everybody on every video during the summer, that's that you need to give your plants a lot more water because they're going to transpire during the day and they are going to lose a lot of water through atmosphere, especially if you've got gigantic leaves like a lot of these trees have. So what is the subject of today's video is actually a question that I get asked quite often. And in order to answer this question correctly, I feel like I needed some examples of each in order to kind of tell you what's going on with these trees or what's going on with these cuttings. So the question really is what size cutting should I be using to root fruit trees? And really there's all different opinions on this. Some people say that a bigger cutting is better to use. Some people say a smaller cutting. Some people say a tip cutting. So I'm going to show you a couple examples right here of each and let you sort of decide for yourself which one works best to propagate plants. So if you're not familiar with cuttings or growing fruit trees from cuttings, really the scoop is you can take a lot of cuttings from a tree that is a known producer, like say this Peter's honey that's sitting right next to me here, and I know that it is a really good fruit and a very highly productive tree. So I'm wanting to replicate this tree, and if I'm wanting to replicate this tree, there are several ways to do that, to propagate the plants. You can do things by air layering them, you can do things from seeds and from grafting, and of course you can do things from cuttings, especially things like fig trees and mulberry trees, because they really tend to lean towards rooting cuttings, especially if you're a beginner. But I'll tell you, this really kind of works across the board, and it works on all plants. And I've been really kind of surprised to see how many plants will actually take from a rooting or from a cutting and will root, and to give you more plants of these delicious varieties that you crave. A lot of you have bigger yards, and so one way for you to propagate or get more plants is to propagate them yourself. So let's talk about these. So really the question is what size of a branch or of a cutting do I take off of this tree in order to get another tree if I want to clone this? And I'll tell you guys, a lot of the time you'll be doing most of this work in the wintertime when these trees are dormant, because it allows you to see the framework of the tree and it allows you to prune the tree. And instead of throwing away all the cuttings that you pruned, a few people want to actually root those cuttings and to give themselves more of the trees that they desire. So size is really the question of the day, and that is what size cutting do I use, or what size cutting is going to work the best for me? And I'll tell you guys, really the answer to this question, if you want to sort of end the video early, is it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what size cutting that you use or take from that tree. I'll tell you, timing is way more important, and you want to do a lot of this work during the winter, like I said, when they are dormant. So I have a few examples here in front of me. The first one here is a Shangri-La mulberry, and you can see that this is a 5-gallon pot, and you can see that this cutting is enormous. Okay, not to get dirty about this, but man, look at the girth on that thing. That is a big cutting. This thing is at least 2 inches across, maybe even 3 up here as it gets a little bit fatter, but it is an enormous cutting. And really this is the beginning of the branch on this particular mulberry. So I used, of course, all parts of that branch, but this is the beginning of the branch. Huge cutting. You can see that it comes up here. I've sealed the top, and you can see that this has now rooted out, bushed out from this, rooted out from this, and it has divided into multiple branches. But you can see how healthy these leaves are. These things are just enormous, and the branch structure is pretty thick itself too. These are becoming quite sturdy. So you can see that he's taken off and has grown about up to my shoulders here. So pretty good height on this one. And you can see that it also has another branch here coming off of this, and another one towards the back here. So you can see that enormous cutting has definitely worked. And I'll tell you, a lot of that comes down to surface area, guys. So this has a large surface area around the base of that cutting, which will allow the roots to form bigger roots faster, okay? So it's gonna have a lot of roots around that system. Now you may say, well, you know, this one's not that tall. But you also have to remember that the energy has been divided amongst these three branches here. So if I had taken off a couple of these branches and allowed this central leader to take over again, well, of course, it would have pumped all the energy into this one branch, and it would look just as tall as the one that's right next to me. So this is also a Shangri-La mulberry. Man, these things just have enormous leaves. Look at this one. Look at the size of that leaf. That is incredible. So this one is taller, but it also has pumped all that energy into this one single trunk that I have trained into a single trunk by staking it into a single tree. You have to remember that the Shangri-La mulberry grows a lot more like a bush than it does a tree. So if you're wanting a tree like this big one that I've got growing here in the back, well, then you have to train it with that central leader and by using that stake. So let's look at this one, since we are talking about this one. And you can see that this one is also in a 5-gallon pot, but this one is a much smaller cutting. So this one is about, I don't know, maybe 5/8, ½ inch to 5/8 around at the base. And you can also see that it is a cutting. There is the top of the cutting there that has been sealed off, and one bud emerged, and it has regrown this much since I've done the cutting, which was in January. So if I hold this up, I mean, it's much taller actually than me. You can see if I hold it up here to where if I stake it a little bit higher, it's going to be a much taller tree at this point. It's about at the 8-foot point at this point. So basically what that shows you is the growth rate of trees from either a cutting or growth rate on trees if you're really taking care of them like I do here at the nursery. That's half the reason why these look so great and not completely torched. If you torch them, they'll stop growing, so you want to get a lot of growth out of these. So if we're talking that much growth in 5 months, so we got January, February, March, April, May, and we've got 8 feet of growth again, then you can see why I always tell people, you know, I don't understand why they're not getting at least 8 to 10 feet of growth per year. Because if we're getting that in just a short season, which these are going to continue to grow, guys, you can see that they are active. They are actively growing, so they have no reason to stop yet, right? So these are going to keep growing over the summer. They love that 100-degree weather. They'll keep growing over the summertime. And then these are going to be, I mean, these could reach, you know, 20 feet in the first year from a little cutting, right? So it's very important, like I said, guys, to water your trees and keep them fed, and definitely have them in good soil. I mean, the soils that I use for these plants are pretty much top notch. I mean, these trees look pretty good, you have to admit, especially right here in 105-degree weather in the middle of the summer. I mean, if nothing else, these would be dried out, you know, but they don't. They're very, very, very good condition. So we talked a little bit about the bigger cuttings, right? And that you can use basically the base of a tree or even a tree trunk. You can restart a tree from any type cutting that you're wanting. You just have to know what you're doing and do the steps correctly, right? Which is cut them at the right time, make sure you seal them good, put them in a good mix and keep them the right moisture level. That's the key, is actually the soil and the moisture level that I keep these at, because you have to keep them moist but not wet or they'll rot. You want them to root, but you don't want them to rot. So that is the larger cutting. Like I said, you can use smaller cuttings, which are more like, let's call this tree like the middle of the branch would be this one, beginning of the branch. And so can you use the tip of the branch? So that's another question I'm always asked is, can I get the tip of the tree to work also? Or is that going to be a little bit harder because it's going to be more like a green cutting and not a woody cutting like these, which tends to not dry out. When you take tip cuttings, especially on things like a fig tree, you have to remember that this is the end of the branch, and this is where the green is going to be to start for the next year, is going to be on this tip. So these cuttings, they don't have a lot of bark on them in which to root. So these you have to do just a little bit slightly different than you do the wooded cuttings, but they will also work too. I mean, this is a really good example of that happening. So this is the tip cutting of a Violet de Bordeaux fig, and you can see that it has activated and is growing quite well right off the side there. This next one is another good example. This is a yellow crookneck, and this one looks really good also. And this one is also from a tip cutting. You can see it right here. You can see that it's the very end of the branch, and that is the tip, the little green tip that I was talking about, which oftentimes likes to dry out. So you can see here it's been activated and it is growing nicely. And of course, that's a nice rooted tree already, even in a smaller pot, which is usually what I do for the tip cuttings, and the size goes up from there as the cutting gets bigger. So that's a small pot, probably a 1 gallon, which is going to be the right moisture level for a tip cutting. Then you've got the next size up, which is a 3 gallon, and this was a larger cutting that was a little bit more on the woody side. And then you've got your 5 gallon pots for your intermediate sizes. This is a Shangri-La. This is also a Shangri-La, and I don't think I would use a pot. I think I'd probably do a bigger pot next time on this size cutting, but a 5 gallon works just fine. This will just have to be transferred into another pot quicker than this one will, because this one has less room to go for the diameter to go wide on the roots, which is what's important on a cutting. Not necessarily the depth of them, but the width is also very important, because you want to keep the tree up. Whereas this one has a lot more room to go to the sides, so this one will be transplanted up to another size pot later than this one will. This one will very soon go into a 15, because I already know that this is already full of roots and probably pouring out the bottom of the pot already. So this one I will leave for just a little bit longer, but you guys can clearly see here that it doesn't matter what part of the branch that you get. You just need a little part of the branch. You know, if I get cuttings from people, I'm often sent just little scraps of things, and I need to sort of get those things to work and propagate them with a very small amount of plant material. So the smaller stuff is obviously slower to go than the bigger stuff. I do like the bigger stuff if I can get a hold of it, but you have to also remember that trying to source larger cuttings is sometimes hard unless you've got a bunch of the trees yourself that you're going to prune anyway. So all the plants in the yard are basically free source material for me now to propagate these plants, because I want to give you guys the best plants available here in the valley and have them always look great. I mean, these things are just amazing for May. All right, guys, so that is it on this video. I thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe, and I will keep putting these videos out. I'm going to be doing a bunch here over the spring, summer, because, of course, all the fruit is coming on, right, guys? We're going to be getting some beautiful, beautiful fruit here. Peaches and apricots, they'll be first. And I will definitely do some more videos on hot weather or summer gardening. And I'm telling you guys, this doesn't just pertain to the Phoenix area. This is anywhere that it's hot and dry and you want to grow some beautiful plants like this. We can definitely get you guys started. All right, guys, that is it for today. Thank you for watching.